Okay, module 6 is our receptive language therapy project. So let's go right to the project. Let's go right to the project. So a couple different things. There is a session plan, so complete the form. Now, a couple different things. Here's the goals. So let's review the goals. So there are goals here that you guys can choose. So what we're looking for is an activity to help address a goal. So a couple different things that I like to do is when you're selecting a session, like an activity to do for a session, what we're looking for is what's the age group. So kind of have an idea about the age group. Like I said, I kind of put them in groups like preschool age, kindergarten through 3rd grade, 4th through 6th, 7th to 12th, and then an adult. Now, what I want to say, doesn't matter if you're in a school-based or outpatient-based, you definitely want to choose age-appropriate subject matter. So regardless of what setting, it should always be age-appropriate. And I know at some points, sometimes that can be a challenge, but just be sure to, you need help, definitely, if you need help with any of that, talk to your supervisor. Sorry, lots of yelling in my house right now. Okay, so let me go back to the modules. Okay, so the project. So you select a goal, you pick an activity to address the goal. There is a plan. So fill out that session plan form. Now, this is more what I like to say, more of like a midterm. So part of it, if you're struggling with an activity, please message me. If you're not sure how to address that goal, maybe try a different goal. If you aren't sure you're on the right track, want some feedback, please let me know. But let's look at some of the read and review stuff. So receptive language therapy ideas. Okay, hold on. Why is it not coming up? There we go. All right. So here's some building blocks. What are we going to do? So these are things that we're usually addressing within our goal base. So sometimes we're really addressing the behavior to help improve receptive language. Sometimes we are increasing, and I say literacy, reading and writing. Obviously, language supports reading and writing. Social skills, sensory processing. Now, here's what I want to tell you too. Sometimes when you're addressing receptive language, you can't always take out the expressive language part, but kind of what we're looking from a data perspective and what our focus is receptive. Are we always going to encourage and support expressive language? Yes. So here's some things, here's some kind of guidelines to help improve receptive language. Eye contact, simplifying the language. So oftentimes we're going to simplify things. We might chunk information. We might repeat the information. We give a lot of first then. So first is kind of, okay, first we're going to do this, then we're going to do this. So that kind of starts to help kind of sequence and organize that information. We're going to clarify. So sometimes in therapy, we're clarifying maybe what a word means, maybe the definition of something, showing them the meaning of the word. So for instance, today I worked on some like feeling words, like the difference between livid and enraged. We were talking about some of those nuances and how those are synonyms. So kind of got a lot of language in my little emotion lesson today. Okay, so clarifying. So clarification can look different. Sometimes it's about showing a picture. Sometimes that's modeling something. It's not always, clarifying isn't always giving a definition or defining something. But what I want to say is that usually what you'll find when you start doing therapy with somebody is you're going to have to give them prompts and cues. and you're gonna have to keep breaking things down. So ideally, always we should have something visual when we're working on receptive language goals, and obviously too, what we're looking at when we're trying to pick an activity is, can we give the client lots of repetition? Can we give them some success? So it's kind of, you have to kind of structure the session in, they have some success, and then we start to challenge them. So sometimes you kind of put it below their level and then you work up. Sometimes you kind of pick a level just arbitrarily, and then you realize, do I have to scale down or do I have to scale up? So do I need to make it easier or do I need to make it harder? So that's the key piece of therapy, is oftentimes we're practicing a skill, everything's going well, and then you got to make it harder to challenge the client, or you need to break it down more and make it easier. So I think that's the hard part of therapy. Play-based activities are great for very young kids. We definitely want to kind of think about the therapy environment. So books are always a good thing to use in receptive language activities. And so here are some of the other basic stuff: naming items, doing day-to-day activities. You have to model the new words. You have to explain new concepts. So sometimes when we're working on a concept, like this is an example. So looking at the concept of wet, we might have to give them several different ways things are wet, as well as some other examples kind of that vary. So if we're just talking about like food or clothing that's wet, now we need to have paper that's wet. Now we need to have, you know, something else, toys that are wet, tools that are wet. So we might need to kind of use some different, I would call them props, not necessarily props, but different items to demonstrate the same concept. So, because sometimes what we do is we work on a skill and then they only know it in that setting versus kind of that broad base. So some other activities, Simon Says is a good one to always do. That's usually listening, understanding. Do they understand the command? What I don't like about Simon Says is sometimes the things they do in Simon Says isn't really functional. So I do have a functional Simon Says where they have to go do things like, you know, go get your backpack, put on your backpack, put on your shoes. Like, so sometimes you can make it functional. Simon Says when you play it traditionally, that's kind of arbitrary things. So I do like functionality. So I tend to be a therapist that likes kind of purposeful things they might do in their day-to-day life versus cutesy. Now, cutesy is always fun, but I'm not always looking for that. I'm always looking for functionality. Like today, for instance, I have a client I work with in, you know, she's a middle school age student, and we're just really doing functional tasks. Like, okay, when she's 20 years old, I want her to be able, when someone tells you to clear off the table, what does that mean? Or help clean up, or if she needs to find paper towels, does she know where to look for them? And where are good places to find paper towels in a house? Where are good places to find paper towels at work? So we did a whole lesson on, you know, you need a cleaning item. What's a good thing to look for? And usually it's, you know, a sink is usually a good place to start. And we were talking about why. But feeling bad game, I really like that. That kind of works on that descriptive characteristics or understanding. So what's hard about descriptive language to me, there is an expressive component, but they have to understand what those descriptive words are before they can use them expressively. So some of these touch and feel activities are real multisensory based. So going back to previous modules, like I said, books are great. They usually have pictures, especially for our younger ages. And so here's, you know, here are things that happen that we know that demonstrates they might need receptive language. So you can kind of review that and kind of what happens if we're not addressing those receptive language needs. But hold on, I lost my train of thought. Going back to some of the other activities too that I like. So with some cutesy stuff, sometimes that's fun, especially if it's multisensory. So sometimes cutesy is multisensory, sometimes it's not, but that multisensory experience. So any way that we can enhance the visual, the auditory, the kinesthetic, the, that tactile piece. And to me, I usually like learn by doing versus sitting and staring at something. So we definitely want to engage and kind of do active things if we can. That's not always possible, and that's not always relevant for depending on what the goal is, but let's look at the goals here. So what I wanted to go back to, hold on, let me stop the share. Let me share again. So when we're, oh, wait, hold on. Second. Okay. So there's some good websites. Oh, that's my old office hour. Sorry. If anybody wanted to watch last year's, I'm sure you didn't. There's app suggestions. I checked out some of these last semester. The nice thing is that some of these got some updates. And I think a couple of them changed names, but there's definitely lots of vocab apps. There's lots of following direction and basic concept apps, which can be fun. Now, again, it depends on the client. What's nice about some of this, especially when you do adult cognitive rehab, there's a lot of good functional things that's not always cutesy on these apps. Lots of grammar, syntax, early literacy. There are some therapy companies that make some great apps. Super Duper, definitely one of them. Lots of great speech artic. And definitely some things to help with some of those social emotional. But what I really want to say about it is if you use an app, I'm not gonna say you can't, because it's definitely relevant within the time, do the app, check it out, see if it's something you think your age group would engage with. So, like I said, I tend to use apps. I do use them for basic concepts because you can kind of move objects pretty nicely. Or I use it a lot for artic, but there are some great apps for that. So yes, someone asked, can I use an app? Sure. Is that should that be your only go-to where you only have apps? No, especially, but that might be really helpful for a home health client or where you don't have to cart a bunch of things. So there are some advantages and pluses to apps, and there's, just like there's pluses and minuses to any activity you do. So yes, you can use an app. And then Smarty Ears is a good app company. They make some great, they have receptive and expressive apps. And then they usually have good activity recommendations. So a lot of things that you can do expressively, you can also do receptively and vice versa. It's just, what are you targeting? So one of the parts that I'm looking at for, I'm not asking you to take data or give me examples, but do you know what type of data you're going to try to get? So sometimes, for instance, today I was working on basic concepts with a client, and I wanted him to put something somewhere. Then the next part, he has an expressive language goal also. Then I wanted him to tell me what he did. So-and-so is at the top. This is, we had these little action figures he likes, and we put them different places with some objects. So I was trying to get him to use a full sentence. So one, I was targeting, did he understand the concept? That was one piece of data. And then of course, the other data I was taking was, measuring his length of utterance. But obviously right now, just for the basis of this project, I want to know, are you targeting the information you're trying to seek from the goal? So if the goal is, the client will respond to simple comprehension questions after listening to information, that's usually a goal I write. I don't always write story-based stuff. I'll say information. And the reason why I like that is a lot of times I want them to be able to, did you listen to the announcements? What was important? Or did you listen to the teacher explain how to do, something? Or, hey, Did you listen to what the lunch monitor asked you to do, or where to put your stuff? Those kinds of things. So I don't necessarily always make it about books or stories, but books and stories is a good thing. But so comprehension questions are a lot of different ways you can do comprehension questions. So that's kind of get an idea. Now, the nice thing about all of this is what I'm looking for. So when I'm grading this, I may not like your activity, but what I'm looking for is did you put some good effort into coming up with an activity to do to address the goal? And then B, were you able to identify how you're going to target that information? So if I'm looking for them to choose the right answer, so sometimes I have visual cues with responses instead of a verbal. Okay, hey, they're going to be able just to pick up the picture. That's a little bit easier for some of our clients versus, verbally responding to questions. Are you able to alter the activity? So I'm looking for, can you make it harder? And then also, can you break it down and make it easier? So usually what I'm really looking for, even if I don't necessarily care for your activity, what I'm looking for is, are you able to scale it up, meaning make it harder, more challenging for a client, and then can you also easily scale it back, break it down, make it easier, because sometimes that's going to happen. You're going to have to make things harder, or you're going to have to make things easier. And sometimes you just have to arbitrarily start somewhere and figure that out as you go. That's the one piece. The other piece are, do you know what responses are you trying to keep data on to get the information? So for instance, if you are completing a following direction goal, how are you going to be judged? How are you going to judge the responses, or not necessarily wanting you to make up a session? So some people will say they'll make up data. I'm not looking for that. I'm looking for, do you know what kind of data you'll be taking when you start the activity? So like today, I was working with my graduate intern, and she says, so are you measuring if he got the position right, or what he says, or if he's able to repeat what we just did? I said, well, really ideally, I'm just looking for, are they able to put it in the right place? That was one piece. And then obviously I'm trying to reinforce the expressive language piece. So, but I wasn't necessarily keeping hard data on that. I was my goal today was really, do they understand the basic concept? Another session I might be really targeting, are they able to tell us what they just did, where they just moved their, their Batman, where did Batman go? So that's what I'm looking for. And then I'm also looking for, did you put some thought and time and effort into making it multisensory? So for instance, you just picked an app. Okay, that's fine. Sometimes apps are great to reinforce the skill. And then how are you going to then measure that? So sometimes you do a session where you practice the skill, and then you do a task where you kind of assess their knowledge. So it just depends. So look at some sessions. You guys have observed some therapy sessions. I know a lot of you have commented about things and activities, and sometimes things are very simple. They don't always have to be complicated, and it's always better to have too much, but not enough. So what I'm looking for, I'm not looking for in-depth, lots of things, but do you have a visual? So I'm usually looking, do you have some kind of visual guide for them, or some kind of visual reinforcer? Did you think about ways to make it harder, ways to make it easier? And then are you able to kind of figure out how are you going to do the session and get some data? So did you put some thought into that? That's really what I'm judging you on. I might give you some feedback about your activity. And did you make some conscious effort to make it a multisensory integration thing? So like I said, I usually, in the way I do things, I usually like to do something active and then maybe have a focus task, which to me is more paper pen based, or we're sitting down looking at something, or more controlled, versus sometimes we're doing things active, sometimes it's controlled. Do we do a variety of things so somebody just doesn't sit there? And I promise you this holds true for adults too, because I want them to be able to recall the information. So that multisensory experience helps with recall, it helps with retention, it helps with a lot of those different cognitive aspects that usually for whatever reason our client is struggling with. So if you need more ideas, and there's plenty of things to look at on Master Clinician, you'll see a lot of stuff on social media about different activities. And I feel like social media really highlights cutesy stuff. And that's okay. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but I'm just saying sometimes that's not always going to, fit the bill for your particular client. And that's okay too. So sometimes I'm looking for more functional things versus, cutesy things, and I'm okay with functional things. Let me see. Any other questions about the project? Let me get the reading summary. Yeah, go ahead.
I am super confused about this project and about loading it up to YouTube. Is it just like, are we just going to be, is it like a presentation?
Yes. Okay. So yeah, I'm not asking you to do a session. I'm not asking you to make up a session or have someone do it with you. What I'm looking, can you present it? So I'll revise those directions a little bit. What I'm looking for is when your supervisor calls you and says, hey, Rachel, how are you going to target, Johnny's comprehension questions the next few sessions? And that you can present an activity. Or what usually happens, I know in my case, when I was an SLPA, I would have an activity and I thought about all these things, and then I would call my supervisor, okay, this, I didn't get this, or wow, they really don't understand this. So usually a lot of times I was calling my supervisor and explaining, what did I do? What did I target? So she usually asked me, what was your activity? What was the goal target? Because sometimes there are both parts of receptive and expressive language in an activity. Those are hard to like just keep it one or the other. And then I would say, hey, I really noticed I couldn't even get any verbal responses. Everything was nonverbal. I didn't give enough opportunities, or wow, they were really bored with that. I couldn't maintain attention. I was usually always calling my supervisor, either problem solve or, hey, this is what I discovered. Get this, they don't understand X, Y, and Z. So today I just did an activity, perfect example. I had this whole thing about where we do zones of regulation and words related to zones. So a lot of kids go, I was just discussing with my graduate intern. What she realized today was that they don't understand words. So when somebody says, I'm furious, or that's annoying, or yeah, I'm a little bothered, they think those are all this level. She was pointing out to me today, it's like they seem to not understand there's a range, like you could be. And so we had to discuss that. So then we had to stop what we were doing because they weren't understanding how to like order the levels. So, okay, let's talk about this again. So we had to break it down, and that's what happens in a session. So what I'm looking for is, can you present it to your supervisor? If she asks you, hey, Rachel, how are you addressing Johnny's goals? Or, hey, I saw in your notes, you wrote this, this, and this. Tell me what happened. What do you think they're missing? So that's really, I'm looking for, do you have the ability to explain to your supervisor what you are doing? And then when your supervisor calls you, that you can kind of report what your purpose or what your goal was. So, because sometimes I'll read a note and I'm like, I'm not sure what my SLPA was trying to target. So I'll ask her about it. Hey, let's clarify, what were you trying to accomplish in this petition when I'll read a session note? So there's going to be a lot of clarifying and giving an explanation of what you did or what you're preparing for a session. So that's what I'm looking for in the presentation. So yeah, and I'm talking no more than, I'll put some time on this too. Some people go on for 10 minutes. I mean, 1 or 2 minutes, that's what's going to be on your phone call. That's what's going to be in your face-to-face meeting. You're not going to have 10 minutes to present all the things you did. It's going to be 1 or 2 minute summary. Hey, and I should be able to see from your session plan that you thought about how to scaffold. What's another word we use? Scaffolding levels, or like I say, basically challenging clients or addressing their need. Because what's nice is sometimes you see mastery really fast. So you want to kind of give them that next challenge. Or, hey, they're really doing great here. And then when I challenged them, they fell apart. And then you might need to work with your supervisor about how to, okay, how can I bridge this gap right here? We're good here. Then I go here, they can't do it. What do I need to do in the meantime? So that's what I'm looking for. and just have some idea, have some type of materials. You can have pictures, you can use clip art. Even if you use something that you bought off TPT, that's okay. You just have to credit it. Because
Okay.
I just did before I just printed out 3 things to do tomorrow with a client off TPT. As long as you're not taking credit for it, I'm just like, hey, I got this off TPT by so-and-so seller. I'm going to use this to address this goal. That's what I'm looking for. So I don't want you to try to do a mock session. I don't want you to try to have somebody do it with you or anything. I'm looking for like a 1 to 2 minute explanation about your session. And so, and really that's what you will do day in and day out. This is a real life activity that you will do. Your supervisor will say, hey, get some activities together to work on sequencing of events. Okay, or like today, I just did it to my SLP. Hey, I need some compare and contrast. We need to talk about how things are alike and different. We're getting bored with the 10 things I have. I need now 10 more. So that's what I'm looking for. Does that clear up some confusion?
It does a lot. I wasn't
Okay.
sure about the whole presentation thing. So
Yeah.
thank you.
It's basically, what are you going to tell your supervisor when she asks you? And I'm sorry, I do always say she when it can be a he or she asks you. So sorry, someone else messaged me about that. Yes, I'm really bad. I only work with one male therapist in a long time, so I apologize for that. Okay, any other questions? So this is basically like a midterm. That's why the project is worth so much, because this is what you will do day in and day out as a SLPA. Any other questions? Okay.
I have a question. Yeah, so I was planning for mine to do a story can we use like Story Champs, like a program type of thing? Is that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. And those are things, especially, like I said, I use those even in clinic based. Some people use the EET, Story Champs is fine. A lot of times too, there'll be things that you see like that they use in school. Oftentimes I'll use what they're using and I'll modify it or break it down or change it a little bit to help them, because usually it's the language piece they're struggling with. So even something like I do a whole thing with middle schoolers about words that they see that are what I call academic words, or I have a whole list of words about like test taking words, like evaluate, summarize, explain the main idea, compare and contrast these 2 things. I use that where you see it all the way through college. So I use that verbiage a lot, even with my very, very young clients. And I do a whole thing just on test taking vocabulary words. So what I'm looking for is, did you put some thought and effort into what you want to use? Like I said, I'm not as judgmental about the materials you use. Just, did you try to make it multisensory? Did you try to be sure you have a plan to make it easier, break it down, or to challenge the client, make it harder? Do you know how you're going to get data? Do you know how to target your activity to get the data that you're looking for? And sometimes you could do a practice mode where you're just practicing. And then the next one is now you're doing some kind of little mini assessment to take data. Sure. Go ahead, Karen.
So it says to choose 2 goals. So are we making one session plan for both goals or one for each?
So choose 2 goals and choose 2 activities. So basically what you'll do, because most of your clients are going to have 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 10 goals. And so what I'm looking for, can you take 2 goals, make an activity to address the goal? So if I don't anticipate you doing them both in one session, but you can. Really, did you choose one activity to address goal 1? Did you choose an activity to address goal 2? That's what I'm looking for. You don't have to like interdisperse or intermingle the goals into your activity. If you want to, you can. I mean, don't make it hard on yourself. But really what I'm looking for is, can you pick one activity to address each goal? So yeah, so videotape it, and yeah, you can record on your phone and then just upload it to you. Sometimes you could directly load it up on Canvas. If it's too long, you usually can't. You usually have to post it to YouTube. If you guys need help with that, let me know. I think most people have been able to just post it directly into onto Canvas. But if you need to use YouTube, again, if they're too long, like I said, 1 to 2 minutes. So I'll put some more clarification in the directions for you guys. Okay.
Okay, but it's okay if we, because for one, just plan one session, because I can hit 2 goals with one session.
Sure.
That's okay?
Yeah, looking for, do you
Okay.
have an activity to address 2 goals?
Yeah,
And sometimes I have the session plan kind of arbitrary up there. As long as you have that, the goal and the activity, so I'll define that for you. Basically, there's like 2 pages. Basically, on that, each one of those session plans, just put the goal and the activity and then use the goal and the activity in the next one.
okay, because I feel like if you're sequencing, you can still ask what like the WH question.
Absolutely, you can.
Yeah.
What I'm really
okay.
looking for is kind of 2 different activities to address 2 different goals. And you're absolutely right. When you're practicing in day to day, you might be needing data on the sequencing goal, but are you always reinforcing comprehension questions? Yes. I think that for every client, you're always reinforcing comprehension. Are you always going to be reinforcing expressive language? Of course. But yeah, so that's what I'm looking for. Like, hey, I'm going to address my, sequencing of a story or a sequencing of events. Here's my activity, and I'm going to, use this to target this, or here's my visual reminder to help them remember, or here's my visual cues if they can't tell me, but I want them to be able to give me the right answer. So a lot of times I use the visuals. So I take out the expressive part. I'm looking for, can you choose which picture goes with the question? So a lot of times sequencing stuff, I don't need them to tell me. I want them to be able to take the pictures and sequence it. So I'm here. Please seek me out if you need some feedback. Like I said, you can check out some of the Master Clinician. There's a lot of good hints and helpful information in a lot of those. Okay.
Thank you.
All righty. Thank you, guys. I'm glad you guys asked questions. I'm glad you guys joined. I'm sure other people had some of the same questions. Stop the share. All righty. Thank you for joining. I'll post a few clarifications up on this. I revamped this assignment, so I'll make sure I'm put some of those parameters in there for you guys.
Thank you. Have a good night.